Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Monday, September 5th. Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see not a whole lot going on. A gale in the far southeast Pacific generating 32-foot seas aimed at southern Chile, but outside of the California swell window. And another gale producing 24-foot seas south of New Zealand, not enough to have any impact into Hawaii or California. Let's get into the details. First off, we're going to look back a week ago. Sunday, what was that, August 28th? A gale pushed under New Zealand, 32-foot seas on, actually 34-foot seas, building somewhat, what was that, about to the 35, almost 36-foot range into Monday, that would be a week ago, and then to 36, almost 37 feet right here. Then on Tuesday it faded, only to regenerate, producing 30 to 31-foot seas, pushing well to the northeast into Thursday before finally fading out. This has produced swell that is working its way towards Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Expected arrival time U.S. West Coast, midweek or so, very small in size, and slowly building up into the latter part of the week, into the early weekend, but still not significant class swell, less than 3 feet at 17 seconds, but still rideable surf from the southern hemi, and for a pretty good number of days in a row, give it something to ride, but nothing more. Now we start looking what's ahead for the next week. First, we start jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales do form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough. That would be a dip in the southern branch of the jet, this portion of the jet, pushing to the north. We don't see anything like that. Instead, we see a ridge. The southern jet pushing well to the south into Antarctica and over Antarctic ice, which is right around 62, 63 south, and just not offering anything to support gale formation. This split pattern, here's the northern branch of the jet, southern branch of the jet. In between, when you get this sort of situation, that supports high pressure down at the surface. Pretty much stomps on any developing gales trying to form. We'll roll this out. We look for some indication, and here we go. On Wednesday, we see energy starting to push to the north. Now, there isn't much of a gap here. You'd want to see this trough be more open like that. Instead, it's kind of pinched off really tight here on Wednesday. And then Thursday, the whole thing starts ridging south again, even further south and more energetic than the last ridge, and just not offering anything. So we're into, where are we? Sunday, we're almost a week out. Still nothing that looks like a trough until you get into Sunday night. Some energy trying to push north right there, and it really doesn't do a whole lot. It's trying again 180 hours out, but it is pretty late in the season. Not unheard of to get southern hemi swells in September for sure, and even beyond, but the second half of the summer has been pretty lackluster, and the current charts suggest a continuation of that pattern. But let's go take a look down at the surface just for fun. And here we go, surface level pressure, surface level winds. As expected, high pressure, 1028 millibars here in the Central Pacific between the split jet. And here's that ridge we were talking about, pushing winds. Notice winds actually pushing straight to the south, in towards Antarctica. Really, and here's that one little gale we saw off here at 110 west. Southern California is right in here. Maybe a little swell to result from it, but not much at all. The swell that is coming from under New Zealand should eclipse that significantly. Anyway, rolling this out, we see south winds. Now, here's a gale forecast. There's a trough forecast in this area on Wednesday. You see, you get some winds here just east of New Zealand at 40 knots on Tuesday night into Wednesday. Another aimed well to the north here, targeting Hawaii pretty well. Oh, and even to 45 knots. This is a bit of an upgrade from what we saw earlier. And then fading out there. It's really kind of cut off. These winds might be a bit overstated. And then that one dissipates. And then we get into this just kind of lackadaisical pattern. No real consolidated fetch of any interest. We're just looking here. Another little gale forecast. When was that? Oh, on Sunday night. That's a week from now. Hard to believe it's going to happen. Very tiny. 45-knot winds, all aimed to the east and pretty much on the edge of the California swell window. Do not expect to see anything much from that. Now we get into 180 hours out. There's some sense that maybe we'll get some fetch under New Zealand again, and maybe something here on the eastern edge of the swell window, but at 180 hours out, none of it is believable. Let's go take a look down and see what effect these winds have on the ocean. And here we go, significant wave heights, South Pacific Ocean. First frame, we saw this already. We've talked about that. Roll this out. Here's the gale that's forecast for Tuesday night. But notice the seas are pushing directly into New Zealand, offering nothing relative to Hawaii. We get into Wednesday. Yes, there's supposed to be 45 knot or 40 knot fetch aimed to the north here. And what is that? 20, 22, 24, 26, 27 foot seas pushing up along New Zealand. Maybe 28, almost 30 feet into Wednesday night. That's certainly good for some swell for Tahiti and up into Hawaii. Maybe a little bit for the U.S. West Coast. Period on this probably be about 15 seconds. Anything less than 16 seconds decays pretty rapidly. So, and the fetch area pretty small in this one. Not a whole lot expected. Another fetch here on Thursday, but it just crashes right into Antarctica, does nothing. We'll roll this out. We're just sort of groping for anything here that looks like it could produce swell. And then we don't really see it. Here's again that little tiny gale we saw in the Southeast Pacific. Nothing really there. And then that broader fetch a week out under New Zealand. We won't believe any of this till it happens, or at least till we get within about the 72-hour window. But if this were to happen, some small southwest swell could result. Let's go take a quick look at the northern hemisphere. Specifically, we're looking at the jet stream. Jet stream, of course, like we said before, is kind of the source of all swell-producing fetch. And the jet actually is not looking horribly bad for early September. It's averaging, probably around 45 degrees north and fairly cohesive, no split, nothing going on. Just a bit of a ridging here, and as one would expect, high pressure here. It's not nudged too much up along the California coast. It's pretty much north of Hawaii. Bit of a trough here forecast over the dateline, and we've just sort of watched this pattern. Notice the jet doesn't really venture too far north of about 45 north, but nor does it venture really south of it, nor does it have a whole lot of wind energy associated with it, but it's not split either, and that is a good sign. We get something that almost looks like a trough on Monday, but again, we're a week out, and building here, that little hook right there, that could make counterclockwise circulation. That would produce west winds on the surface and maybe produce some fetch. With high pressure here, it looks like the ridge in the jet protecting the U.S. West Coast. Something to monitor. A week out, again, not believable. Let's just jump right to the wave models, see what's going on. And here we go, significant wave heights, the North Pacific Ocean. We see the remnants of Lester, Hurricane Lester tracking northwest, having produced raw, wind-driven swell for north and east shores of the Hawaiian Islands, now working its way away and having no impact to pretty much anybody. We roll this out into Wednesday. So there's high pressure here at the surface. Lester's just following that track around and likely to get captured by the jet stream, pushing somewhere into Canada. Other low pressure, spurious semi-tropical low pressure pushing off of Japan, following the jet. Now here's Lester on, we're a week out. We're on, well, almost a week out. Friday was at 17-foot seas, working its way into British Columbia. And we did see a bit of a trough here. Low pressure trying to organize, generating 18, 19. Here we go. What is that? Maybe 23-foot seas. Even better. Look at that. A little spot of 26, 27-foot seas on the date line, a little bit far to the north here, but maybe good for some early season swell for certainly California and Hawaii, period in the 14, 15 second period range. Nothing too solid, working its way into the Gulf into almost a week out. Another system behind that, trying to get organized, and it does 180 hours out, but both these systems quite a ways from forming, 72 hours out again. Then we'd start getting interested, but this does suggest the southern hemi is going to sleep. The northern hemi is trying to come online, seasonally pretty normal at this rate, and that's good. We'll take it. We're ready for some real surf for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Let's look a little bit longer term, beyond the next week, for the next couple of weeks, next month, and then maybe the next year. Specifically, looking for the MJO. Active phase of the MJO tends to support storm formation in the North Pacific in winter months. And then also El Nino, La Nina. Currently, we are in some sort of a La Nina state, but as you will see, it is extremely weak. So looking for MJO, signs of the active phase of the MJO. First off, we take a look at winds in the Kelvin wave generation area from 135 east out to about 170 west and 5 degrees north or south of the equator. We see east winds over the whole area. That's normal for this time of year. Anomalies, differences in normal for this time of year. Everything is completely normal, neither biased towards the inactive phase or the active phase of the MJO, or for that matter, La Nina, unless you're looking at surface temperatures, which these represent cooler than normal waters here, which is a clear sign of La Nina. But right now, it's the winds that interest us the most. Taking a look at winds over the past 5 days, Kelvin wave generation area is right here, 5 degrees north or south. Just draw a box in your mind right there. Oranges and yellows represent westerly anomalies, blues, easterly anomalies. We're looking for westerly anomalies. That's the active phase of the MJO. Just sort of scrolling down here. You don't see anything. If anything, the westerly anomalies are getting weaker in the Kelvin wave generation area and turning towards easterly anomalies. That's suggestive of the inactive phase of the MJO. And here's a retrospective view, the Kelvin wave generation area, pretty much between these two tick marks. This is the whole planet on one chart. We just looked down past history, August 6th up the current. And the blues, of course, are easterly anomalies. We see little pockets of westerly anomalies, but really it's been easterly anomalies since mid-August or so in the Kelvin wave generation area. And here's the forecast for the next week in this area. You see it's just kind of a mixed bag, neither east nor westerly anomalies. Looking at some other models, this is outgoing long-wave radiation, sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface. More clouds would represent less sunlight reflectivity. That would be blues. That would suggest the active phase of the MJO. More reflectivity, that would be positive numbers. That would suggest high pressure at the ocean surface in the inactive phase of the MJO. And as you see, this per the statistic model suggests we're in a dead neutral state and supposed to stay that way for the next 2 weeks. The GFS ensemble model suggests over the next 2 weeks we are to get more sunlight reflectivity, suggesting the inactive phase of the MJO. Phase diagram charts, we've seen these before too. Assume you are looking down on the north pole of our planet, and the active phase of the MJO travels from west to east from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent. This would be like Bali, Indonesia, that area, over the dateline into the West Pacific, into the Americas, and then over the Atlantic Ocean into the Western Hemisphere, Africa, Europe, all on the equator, then back to the Indian Ocean. The big dot is where the active phase of the MJO is. If it's inside the circle, it is extremely weak. This suggests the ECMF model suggests the active phase of the MJO is about as weak as it can possibly get and as basically non-existent. The green line suggests the forecast, suggests no sign of the active phase of the MJO. The GEFS model basically suggests the same thing, or if anything, if it does materialize, it'll be in the far West Indian Ocean, which does nothing for anyone in our forecast area. So a dead, if anything, probably inactive MJO pattern. And here's another way to take a look at, we're looking for wind anomalies and the MJO. This is current time. This is past history. This is the future forecast. Kelvin wave generation area between 120, let's say 135, so from about here to just a little bit east of the dateline, so right in that area. Past history, we see there was some westerly anomalies, but now we are moving into basically kind of a mixed bag, nothing going on. That would suggest a neutral MJO pattern. Overlay it, sure enough, that's what we see, the active phase of the MJO moving east out of the picture. A very weak inactive pattern. Forecast coming in, let's say about the 10th of September, and forecast to hold the whole month through pretty much towards the end of October. Just a neutral pattern, little bits of easterly anomalies, but this is very weak indeed. The solid contours again suggest another active pattern setting up late October around the Halloween time frame, but all the westerly anomalies aren't really supposed to move into the West Pacific, and even when they do, it's very weak. And the model's been continually showing some sort of a bigger active pattern, but it's always a month and a half out, and it never seems to get any closer, which suggests this is more of an anomaly than reality. The pattern has been, as you can see, yes, there are active and inactive phases, but things are just very weak. That is actually good. We're in La Nina, one would think, and La Nina is biased towards the formation of the inactive phase of the MJO, which tends to just stomp on storm production, both in the winter and in the summer down south. So a neutral pattern would be better than what it could be, especially coming off a strong El Nino. You typically get a strong bounce back in the opposite direction, a strong La Nina. All this suggests is even getting into, here we are, December, and nothing strong on the inactive phase side of things. That is a real gift, everything considered. So from an MJO perspective, not a whole lot forecast for the next 2 to 3 months. Neutral, that's okay, we'll take it. Looking at the ocean, though, there is a clear sign that La Nina is in fact in play. No hope for some sort of a miraculous rebirth of El Nino. La Nina is it. All warm water pulled up in the West Pacific, ocean trying to recharge after a major push to the east of warm water for the past 2 years. Now it's all going back to the West Pacific, building subsurface. We're at depth here. Here's down 100 meters, down 200 meters. This is the West Pacific. This is the East Pacific. And you can see the 28-degree isotherm line is making no incursions to the east. If anything, this suggests cooler water at depth, and this is pretty typical of a La Nina. Here's actual anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year at depth. Warmer water, not particularly warm, only 1 degree above normal here in the West Pacific. 2 degrees below normal at depth, but pretty much normal to just maybe 1 degree above normal, erupting at the surface here, south of Hawaii, basically. And a thin, weak, normal pattern the whole way to Ecuador. This is not bad given what it could be. The high-res version of that data suggests, well, maybe it's a little bit cooler than one might expect. This suggests right in here, what is that, the second shade of blue, 1 to 2 degrees below normal. But again, westward displaced. You know, there is cool water at depth here working its way into Ecuador, but right at the surface, things are pretty much normal. Most of the activity, the big pool of cooler water, what is that? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 degrees below normal or so, but not making it to the surface. Everything's westward displaced, sort of like El Nino. And you noticed when we looked at the surface charts before, high pressure was not sitting directly up along California. It was north of Hawaii too. And high pressure, this is kind of the thought for the coming winter, is if the cool pool stays out here, the La Nina cool pool stays south of Hawaii, high pressure wave will stay south of Hawaii. What that means is a loft that storms will track north of the high and then fall perhaps down the California coast. That sets you up for a lot of backdoor fronts. You don't get a lot of precipitation with that, but what you do get is cold temperatures, and the bit of precipitation you do forms a good snowpack, a good, cool, great skiing and boarding snowpack. So maybe, just maybe, we'll get something. The same sort of thing happened after the 2009-2010 El Nino. The winter of 2010-2011 was epic in terms of a lot of snow and very good quality, not rain, low snow levels. Now, we're not saying it's going to do that, but it sort of is giving us some hints right now. That's what might happen. But the true winter pattern doesn't really show up till late November, early December, maybe about mid-December. That's when a switch tends to flip, and whatever's really going to happen, that's when it digs in. So, but for now, looks mildly encouraging snow-wise, and maybe not so much surf-wise, and certainly the storms would be more north-angled relative to California. For Hawaii, this also could mean most of the storm activity be in the West Pacific, west of the date line, so there'd be a lot of westerly longer period swells for both Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. And we've seen this chart before. This is upper ocean heat anomalies to upper 300 meters of the ocean. Last year, October, of course, Kelvin waves, warm water traveling from the West Pacific. And where is the West Pacific? We'll just look. There's the date line. So Kelvin wave generation is even over here. But warm water, 1, 2, this is actually like, I think, the 5th or 6th Kelvin wave in February of 2016. Then cool water came rushing east. This was the start of our La Nina. And notice it's kind of fallen apart. Yeah, there's still this, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4 shades. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1.5 to 2 degrees below normal. Again, right here north of Hawaii. But as you get in California at 120, we're talking pretty much normal temperatures. And all you got to do is go in the ocean to know the temperatures aren't that cold. There's no clear sign of some major La Nina going on yet. We'll see what happens come January or so, but the thoughts are this La Nina is, at least this year, not going to materialize a whole lot. Let's go take a look at surface temperature anomalies. Now, just today here off of Peru, we noticed some cool water starting to show up along Peru and a little bit cooler off the coast of Ecuador. This was all, these warm anomalies were all tucked up right along the coast and have been for a week or two now, starting to give way a little bit, perhaps another pulse of La Nina getting ready to happen. All the cool water was west of the Galapagos, and even there, just right along the equator, this area was pretty much mashed down, but you see it's starting, cool water starting to build down to about 5 or 6 degrees south, but none to the north. And then the real bulk of the La Nina cool pool is out here from, let's say, 110 west, but most of it out here south of Hawaii somewhere, and just east of the Hawaiian Islands. Again, this thought of a westward displaced La Nina. Here's the trend for the past 7 days. We're looking for anything here. We see just one little pocket of blue here along Peru, suggesting of a little bit of cooling, nothing significant. But the oranges and reds suggest the trend has been towards warmer temperatures here, even west of the Galapagos. And then again, this mixed pattern of blue and red. Yeah, it's cooler, but, you know, the trend isn't going one way or the other. Whatever we've got doesn't appear to be getting any stronger in terms of coolness. And then the actual anomalies, looking at the whole Pacific in general, see pretty much a normal pattern here in the Nino 1.2 region, which would be from here out to about here somewhere, and even off to a point south of California, pretty much normal. Here is your cool pool, westward displaced. Hawaii is right there. That's where the balance of the activity is. That's where one would expect to see north of this in the winter months, where the bulk of high pressure would be. If this was warm and it was El Nino, wherever the warmest temps are, that's where you would expect to see the bulk of your storm activity in the winter. And that's what happened. Our El Nino was westward displaced. It didn't mash in here into Peru at all. It was all out in this region, and most of the storm activity was out here, and then the jet pretty much split off the California coast all winter long and fell apart. Yeah, we got precipitation, just barely eked out normal precipitation from San Francisco and Tahoe northward, but south of there it was pretty much down below normal. Southern California way below normal. So now the thought is high pressure would be westward displaced, storms would come off, and notice a lot of warm water, warmer than normal water right here. This is, we believe, associated with the positive phase, active phase, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. Too early to call that. So a lot of storm activity would probably happen in this area, then get shunted north, and then come down the California coast, backdoor front pattern that we talked about. But who knows? That's just a idle speculation at this time. So we've talked about weather for the past coming week. We've talked about the active and inactive phase of the MJO, and that's pretty much a 4 to 6 week cycle on and off, and that's pretty much neutral. We've talked about El Nino and La Nina, and yeah, we're in La Nina, but it seems to be kind of a weak La Nina. We'll get into that in just a minute. But what's the actual effects on the atmosphere? Well, here was our big El Nino. This is the 30-day Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. A good measure of the strength of El Nino or La Nina. Here was our El Nino trend, the index moving negative into October 2015 and hanging there, bouncing. You can see pulses of the MJO into even May of 2016, and then boom, here comes La Nina. The Southern Oscillation Index turns positive for the first time of any magnitude in, what, basically almost 2 years. But notice, it's only going to 5. It's not going up to 15 or 20 or 25. It's just barely above neutral, which is, again, sort of indicative of all the other data that we're seeing too. Not a strong La Nina. We can take a look at the ESPI index, very similar to the Southern Oscillation Index. Difference in total precipitation north of Darwin, Australia, and then north of Tahiti. If the index is positive, that suggests more precipitation in this area, which suggests El Nino. Negative, it suggests more precipitation over here, the presence of La Nina. We are negative at 0.5. Not particularly strong. It was up to minus 1.5, but has continually backed off over the past month or so. Again, another indicator of just a very weak La Nina. And finally, the forecast for Nino 3.4 temperatures. That's the main area. This is right where La Nina is right now. Now, here was our El Nino, warmer than normal temperatures, up to almost 3 degrees above normal back in the winter of 2015. Going negative as expected as La Nina takes shape. Temperatures went down a little bit over half a degree below normal in August. But here's the really interesting part. We saved this for last because it is so interesting. Look at the trend. Now, originally this model had projected temperatures down around 1.5 degrees. And over the past 2 months, it has steadily backed off. And now it's saying we've reached the peak of La Nina already. Our lowest temperatures are now, or almost past, because September is out in here somewhere. And that the trend from here is it gets slightly warmer to what? About 0.25 degrees. And then dipping to maybe about 0.25 degrees. And come January, we're at dead neutral, and then we start rising from there. Now, honestly, we don't believe this. You know, maybe, I mean, this part sure is believable. If you're in a weak La Nina, you could sit there. La Nina, it's got to be minus half a degree or more for 3 consecutive 3-month periods. And given this, one could not even declare what's coming as an official La Nina. And when you look at this and go, oh, that looks like El Nino coming again, there's no way that's going to happen just based on looking at the subsurface temperature profile. There is no warm water at depth to even move from the West Pacific to the East Pacific to create anything that would resemble this sort of a curve. But just hanging around in neutral, totally realistic. What this might, so there's 2 ways this could go. One could say, yeah, we had a big El Nino, but it didn't fully discharge all the heat in the ocean. And one can look at the sea surface temperature or anomaly charts, like here, and go, well, there sure is a whole bunch of warmer than normal temperature. Yeah, maybe not right on the equator, but everywhere around it, there's not a lot of warm, and maybe this is warmer than normal water being discharged from El Nino, but it hasn't totally dissipated, and this La Nina thing is not doing anything to help hamper or encourage the dissolving of that warmer than normal anomalies. The other way this could go, though, is just say, yeah, we fumble around at not anything that really resembles La Nina this year, but when you get into 2017, then the El Nino that the La Nina that we've all been expecting will materialize, and then you'll get your big dip down to 1.5 degrees or something like that. Who knows? Really hard to say. And yet the third way one could look at this is if we are moving towards the positive phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, that is, these 15 to 25-year cycles where you have periods where El Nino dominates in the positive phase, and then you go into the down phase of the PDO, and you have 15 to 20 years of where El Nino, and then La Nina dominates. Okay, so here's the deal. Since 98 up to present, we've been in a La Nina dominant period. That is cooler than normal ocean temperatures. If we're moving, and this is the thought, that we are moving towards we'll call it the active phase of the PDO, the plus phase of the PDO, that happens, this could be a sign that La Nina can't get a foothold, and especially if it doesn't materialize in 2017, and that the next 10 to 20 to plus years could be dominated either by neutral surface temperatures or warmer than normal surface temperatures, and that tends to really support storm formation in the North and the South Pacific in winter months, then maybe we're into moving towards a good place. We're finally digging ourselves out of the hole that we've been in for 15 years. I've said it before. If you've were around prior to 97, back in the early 90s, and before that, the 80s, there used to be a lot more storm production, a lot more big surf all the time in the North Pacific. Past 15 years, yeah, we've had our days, but it's been pretty lackluster in general. Maybe we are starting to turn the curve. Who knows? Way too early to know. We'll see come about February of next year where we're at, and then it's only in retrospect. You start looking at the charts, you start looking at the data, how many storms we had, how, what laid down for the winter, and that will give you a sense maybe of what's to come, and especially looking at water temperatures here in the Niño 3.4 region. If they stay neutral and there's no signs that they're going to dive into some big La Niña in 2017, then that would be a really good sign that we're moving towards the plus phase of the PDO. But for now, getting back into the reality of the next week or so, small southern hemi swell on the way for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Not significant class, just something to ride. The model's suggesting perhaps some activity a week out starting in the North Pacific. Jet stream looking pretty good. That would be a good thing. And then beyond that, we'll take it day at a time. MJO not really giving us a push one way or the other, and not really forecast to. Anyway, there's surf coming, and there's been wind swell in Northern California, so take what you can get. Anyway, that's it. We'll do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.